Friday, the final day of the week. These are the voyages of the program Unsportsmanlike Conduct. Its ongoing mission: to explore strange new movies, to seek out new bits and new edifications, to boldly go where no radio program has gone before. Elkant's Movie Club. It's Elkant's Movie Club. Elkant's Movie Club. It's Elkant's Movie Club. This does not happen very often. Kent is one of our most punctual and reliable guests, but he did inform us a little while ago.
He's like Tom Coughlin. He actually arrives early.
Yes, that there was a meeting he was in that was running a bit long.
Yes.
And so he was hoping to be here by 4 p.m. It is almost 4 p.m. So
it is indeed.
we knew that this might be a possibility. Hopefully, Kent will be able to join us here very shortly as we commence the movie club on October the 18th. Well, we're just, I mentioned that because we have been
spooky season.
We've been focused on the spooky season movies.
Yeah, what have we done so far this month now? So last week we did
last week was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Before that it was Blair Witch.
And
then today we did Texas Chainsaw. Nick is up next. I assume you got another spooky
movie. I got another
for?
spooky movie.
All right, perfect.
Great.
That'll be lovely.
Oh, what do you mean, oh, great, John?
Are you finding that you're out on horror movies the longer we get into this month?
No,
you're out on Nick horror movies.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I just don't want to encourage people if we get to December.
Christmas movies.
I watch the Hallmark movie channel.
Okay, see, nobody wants to watch that
Don't worry,
crap, John.
Nobody's going to pick Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly. Laszlo.
A fine Christmas movie. Maybe the best Christmas movie.
Laszlo writes, Friday afternoon meetings are disgusting.
It should be illegal.
Yeah, who would schedule a meeting on a Friday
afternoon? Kent is part of the Journal Star editorial board.
What does that mean?
I mean that.
Are they going to put their weight behind a nominee for president? Is that what this is? Do people care about that? Can you imagine needing a newspaper to tell you who to vote for, and then you're like, all right, that's what I'm doing because the Journal Star told me to.
The politicians love it because then they can start stacking things. The New York Times, and the Washington Post, and the LA Times, and the Chicago Tribune all endorse candidate X.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I would vote for Bane if he were running right now.
Would you?
Oh, absolutely.
He was anti-capitalism.
He was actually a terrorist.
Yeah, and he was a terrorist.
At least we know what he is.
Interesting. Hey,
devil, you know.
Exactly. The devil, you know.
Interesting.
The devil, you know.
Theo writes, I get my political news from the 1620 chat.
Oh, that's
scary to think about.
Wow. To know that somewhere out there Theo is involved in
Theo's a
people.
voter.
Yeah.
Well, should we start this? Should we start this process? It is 4.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'd never seen it before.
Neither had I.
I haven't either.
Wow.
No.
You hadn't seen it either.
Well, it never, that I recall, because most of the scary movies I have seen were all because it was on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
I think Nightmare was too. It was all because, it was on cable. It was never any, the horror movie genre was never anything that I sought out.
Yeah.
But if I was in the right mood or if friends were around and stuff, we would, and it was on, we would watch it.
Yes. And
I don't ever remember this film being available on like an HBO.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly it wasn't on, and back in the day, you didn't have as many movies that, that ran on quote unquote regular TV. I mean, there were, but this one definitely would not have, it would have been hard to put this one on, quote unquote edited or regular TV.
I think I saw the 2003 one, but clips of it because it was one of those I wasn't supposed to watch it, but I was sneaking peeks.
And if I remember right, that was when I first learned about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was when the 03 version came out, which I have actually never seen before either. I know the general story, and if you don't know the general story of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, there is a reason why this is one of the most influential horror movies, because It is a story about a bunch of teenagers, or at least people in their their early 20s, driving. They stumble upon a killer, and off to the races we go. And so, like, it makes sense that this became something that was replicated. This is just the first version of it. I'll be honest, I didn't really like it. I thought it was, I mean, first of all, it was weird as hell.
Yes, it was.
I just didn't find it scary. I just found it violent. It was just, it took, how long did it take until they actually got to the house, until the first murder took place? It's only an 80-minute movie. 40 minutes, maybe?
35, 40 minutes.
And then after that, it's just kill,
That being said,
kept alive for a while, escape, end of movie.
I do appreciate how they handled the kills, because the first one just happened. Like, I feel like in a lot of horror movies, there's always build up to the first kill, or it's always kind of torture porn, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
And it was the guy, right? It was
it was just one of the guys. He just walked in, and then guys like, oh.
Then all of a sudden the door opens, and that was the one thing I did like about this, was even though it was, I mean, you're dealing with an entire insane family who has a fetish for, carcasses and bones and, keeping old relatives alive beyond
though
their
the grandpa
expiration
was
date.
alive, which stunned me.
Yeah.
Remember when he was licking that finger?
They're just furniture makers, guys. They just like to make furniture.
They do like furniture.
But it had a sense of realism in that, for example, first guy gets killed, he's just standing there, and all of a sudden the big metal door opens, there's Leatherface with a hammer, pap, right over that. That's it.
Yep. And
then, the guy falls to the ground, and he's doing the whole convulsing thing.
Then he kills him.
Then he kills him. He finishes him off. And so there's not this drawn out, overly dramatic, it's just very simple. It's just like, bap, boom, done, finished. And so from that standpoint, I appreciated it because it seemed like it was a little bit more, again, realistic as much as you can be for a movie like this. As Kent Wogemont now joins us. Hi, Kent.
Hi, Kent.
Hello. We just got started, so you haven't missed a whole lot.
Yeah, we were talking about other things for a few minutes, killing time.
We were, but Josh just mentioned how you didn't care for the movie.
Yeah, Ken, I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of it, while acknowledging that I understand why this became so influential on the genre, and not to repeat myself too much, but I mean, it starts with a bunch of young people showing up somewhere, and then the killings begin.
It establishes all the tropes,
yeah,
basically.
But so here was my issue, I guess, Kent, and maybe it's just going into a horror movie expecting, it's not that I need to be frightened, because I don't think Halloween is that scary of a movie either. But this was just like kill, kill, kill. It's just straight violence at a certain point, and less intrigue, I guess. I don't know if that's the word that I want to use.
There wasn't suspense, really.
Yeah, I came away a little disappointed, just given, maybe I just built this movie up in my brain too much over the years without seeing it.
And you've also been, what do you want to say? The movies that have followed this one have taken those tropes and added to them, that has created that sort of expectation of that kind of movie, where this one was the one that kind of really wasn't the very first one, but it was the one that really started it. And so it doesn't have all the, right? That's number one. Number two, the reason for that, frankly, is this was an ultra low budget independent project.
Yes.
They made it in like 3 days, literally 3 days. Or shot it anyway. And when you do that, and it was made in 1973.
Yep.
All of those things. So there's not a lot of character development in it.
No.
Which is part of why you don't get the suspense or the attachment to the characters.
Correct.
No character development, right? That's number one. Number two, it functions. I remember it in the 70s, okay? And if you'd have seen this at the State Theater in 1974, when I saw it, it was scary because there weren't other movies
like that
did this.
Right.
And the other thing that this doesn't do, contrary to popular opinion or understanding of people obviously haven't watched the movie, is it's not gory.
No, it is not.
right? I mean, yeah, there's blood in it and stuff, but it's not the blood. Well, Nightmare on Elm Street. There's no blood shooting out of the head, right?
Yeah, literally a dude in a wheelchair gets carved to pieces by a chainsaw, and I've seen more gore in a WWE match.
Yeah, for sure.
Quite honestly. So you're right, Ken. It's not.
It's not what I built it up in my brain.
And that surprised me because I thought this was like, and it is a slasher film, but I thought this was like the first film that really introduced a ton of gore. But I bet in 1974, for those standards, it was a lot.
In 1974, it was also it got an R rating, right? But if you put this movie out today, you wouldn't get an R rating.
No.
It might be PG-13.
Was there even a swear word in it?
No.
It is for a movie about a bunch of people getting killed. It is as tame as you can have a movie that it is about a bunch of people getting killed.
What really interested me about this?
What a word.
So Leatherface, everybody knows Leatherface.
Yep.
And I expected Leatherface to be kind of the main guy, but then we meet the family, and then you're like, Leatherface isn't the main guy.
No, he's a cog in the machine.
A cog in the machine, but everybody talks about Leatherface, but not the other creepy.
The grandpa's the creepiest.
The grandpa's
absolutely,
the creepiest.
By far.
People don't talk about the weird body horror furniture, which I thought was really cool. Weird to say.
Nice.
Really weird thing to say. I thought that was really cool.
And I have the murder cult.
You know what?
You don't see stuff like that.
You know what it's similar to? If you think back to the original Star Wars, Darth Vader was not the main bad guy. It was Grand Moff Tarkin.
Mm-hmm.
Darth Vader became the legend because he had the cool uniform and, had
great voice.
Had the great voice. And of course later became that guy. But, and that movie came out 3 years after this one. But the patriarch of the family was the more creepier guy than Leatherface.
Mm-hmm. And that's the perfect analogy because the 5 or however many more TCM movies that have come after this, it has been Leatherface, the main character, right? Mm-hmm. Because they figured that out and made him the main character.
I kind of liked it when he wasn't, though. I kind of liked that.
Absolutely. That to me was, and part of the other part of what you're talking about here, and maybe this is why it didn't grasp as so scary, is this movie is also, really, Tobe Hooper and a screenwriter whose name has just escaped me, put this movie together at the height, essentially, of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Kim
Henkel. They wrote this movie at the height of Vietnam. So there's some measure of Vietnam horror that you saw on your TV every night.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the kind, right? You saw people getting blown up they actually would show it, right? On TV every night. There's something in it of they were essentially hippies in Austin, for lack of a better way to put it, who made this movie about how everything outside of Austin is scary and going to get you, because Austin at that time, and to some measure still is, the only tolerant, liberal, whatever you want to call it, place in Texas.
Yeah.
And the more rural you get, the worse it got.
And that's
the undercurrent that was written into this movie, but not explicitly, but that's why it plays the way it does.
And I did have that thought while I was watching, because after last week, when we did Nightmare on Elm Street, we had a similar conversation where I just didn't think it was scary, and that's because we're desensitized, more or less.
Fair.
So I tried to find where the horror elements could have been at the time, and that was one of those questions I had, is some of this, like Kent just said, the city people in a small town? Because you don't have any way of knowing. You're just in this place where these kids haven't been in 20 years, but for however long. It's just, you go to this small area where cultures are different in small towns. There's different norms than there would be in a city. And it can seem strange to people. Obviously, murdering is strange.
Yeah, that's interesting, Kent, because, on one hand, I'm like disappointed that I didn't know, the parables. On the other, like, how would I, right? Like, I wasn't alive in 1974,
Right, yeah.
but it makes sense when whereas some, whether it's satire or movies of the day or TV shows of the day can feel like you're getting beaten over the head with something. In some of these other movies, like this one, it doesn't beat you over the head. Whereas now we're talking it out and it's like, oh, that is a lot more interesting than it was at first blush for me.
The other element in here that you have that really made it in the 70s and has kind of become, what do you want to say, expected today, was there was not, if you go back and look, there may have been a couple slasher characters, but if you look at the horror movies, they were monster movies.
Mm-hmm.
They were supernatural, devil, Rosemary's Baby kind of things. There were the Hammer movies from England, the ones with Vincent Price and those people that were, kind of classic suspense horror-ish, Pit and the Pendulum, but they weren't like this. So this thing introduced this kind of ultra creepo villain, whatever, as this family in a way that had not been seen before. I mean, cannibalism and whatever was not a big topic in the 1970s. Okay.
And did this movie borrow from Psycho? Like, was that an influence on that?
Absolutely. It's Ed Gein. Ed Gein was
Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, a farmer in Wisconsin who was a grave robber. Notice the opening of this. Mm-hmm. And then he killed at least 2 women and probably more, but he would take their skin and make masks out of them, which is where Leatherface came from.
Yeah. Okay?
So those are, and then this is also based on a serial killer out of, I believe, rural area around Houston, which is where they got the idea of going out to the farm and being killed, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm. So
that's where those came from. I have to point this out because it's interestingly weird. The house, this was all filmed in small towns around Austin that are now cities, right?
Yeah, been taken over.
Round Rock, Texas is not what it was in 1973 or Bastrop or wherever. Somebody bought that farmhouse, and that was an actual farmhouse they shot it in, moved it to another city, and have turned it into a restaurant that's called Groupers. And it's a big popular place because you're eating in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house.
Where's that at? I assume you looked this up. Do you know what city it's in?
I saw it, but I did not.
Kingsland, Texas.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it is funny. It is, become that.
Yeah, there it is.
By the way, it's kind of ironic or coincidental, actually. A couple weeks ago, we did Blair Witch Project, which many people were fooled into thinking was real. Of course, the narration at the beginning of this movie claims that it is real. Uh-huh. Now, it is based, as Kent mentioned, on a couple of things. The only person in this film whose name I recognize is the narrator of the opening, the words.
Yeah.
That's John Larroquette. John Larroquette, who played Dan on Night Court and was in Stripes.
Okay.
He performed the narration. He was paid in marijuana.
Hell yeah. We love the 70s.
That's how he got paid for it.
That's 70s.
Even better, if you want to know the pot associations with this film, that the farm where they filmed it, the guy was growing pot. And he told them, if you want to go get some and dry it and use it, fine. So there was allegedly a rule that you couldn't be smoking pot while the filming was going on. Apparently it wasn't closely followed.
It was the 70s.
It was the 70s. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Like the guy that gets beat up with the hammer, with the sledgehammer. This was a very dangerous shoot. That hammer was actually made out of foam rubber.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
but they smacked him with it. They weren't supposed to hit him. It was supposed to, and the guy hit him, and they basically beat the crap out of this guy and threw him through a wall. And it really happened. And like when they cut her finger and Grandpa drank blood, they really cut her finger.
And Grandpa really drank her blood,
apparently. And and there's all and Gunnar, what was his last name? The Leatherface.
I knew I should have opened this. Hang on, let me see.
Whatever his last name was, did not know how to use a chainsaw.
No way.
Gunnar Hansen did not know how to use a chainsaw, and that's why you see part of why it was swinging all over and they were afraid he was going to cut his leg off.
Yeah, understandably so.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
which then he actually does cut himself at the end.
So was that real too, Kent?
That I don't know, but I know that they were like, he's going to really hurt somebody with this.
Yeah.
And this was complete guerrilla filmmaking. So most of these people were recent graduates of the University of Texas or gone in the film school.
Mm-hmm.
There was no union. There was no supervision. This was unsupervised hit and run 3-day filmmaking.
Interesting.
Right? Shot on 16 millimeter, which is why it has that grainy kind of appearance,
which I think works. And and that's why I think it does make this movie scary.
And the daylight scenes are because they didn't have the money to do the reverse, right? Where you shoot it at day and make it look like night.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they had to literally shoot it in the day. And so she's in this dark house and then jumps out and it's the middle of the day. Right. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff. That all happened. And so it was like how this thing became a huge hit. Obviously, it had some appeal as this great horror movie in 1974. And you want to know making money? $140,000 budget. Made $40 million.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's very similar, Ken, in a way to the conversation about Blair Witch a couple weeks ago, where it's this out of nowhere hit. It's made on a shoestring budget, and it is totally different from anything that we had at the time, and it just totally blows up.
A couple things I wanted to mention. You mentioning that they were UT grads. I listened to their accent, and they did sound like they were from Texas, which it's a very small detail, but it's a detail that I think a lot of movies get wrong, and I think that helps with the immersion, like their mannerisms and everything that felt Texas. And you said, so they didn't film at night? They didn't do any night filming, or they did?
Well, they did what they could, but apparently the kind of film they used requires a lot of light.
Okay.
And so if it got too dark, like they couldn't illuminate the outside. Mm-hmm. To make it halfway, they couldn't make it light enough outside to shoot at night without making it look like the building was in a spotlight, right?
Yeah. So that scene where she's getting chased, was that a night? Was that a night?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember thinking to myself, it doesn't look bad. It looked decently, like not decently lighted, but it felt real. And I did like how that was filmed.
And it was all handheld too, by the way, the camera. Yeah. You don't have dolly shots when you're using a camera that's this big and you're spending $140,000.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
I did want to read this because we got an email from Dave in the Equitable Bank inbox, and it talks about his experience watching the movie. Now, this is from 20 years ago.
Okay.
But he says, I saw it at Dundee Theater in 2004 at midnight, and it was one of the great movie theater experiences of my life. If you've never seen a midnight movie at Dundee, it's a bunch of teens and 20-somethings, likely drunk, cracking jokes, yelling at the screen, and so on. It's disruptive yet fun. Texas Chainsaw was no different at first. As you know, the first half is pretty slow. A bunch of kids just having fun in Texas, and then the crowd was having fun too. Around the 30 or 40 minute mark, when Leatherface makes his first kill and the steel door shuts, it was frightening even for me seeing it for the third time, but first time on the big screen. And that moment from the slam of that door and for the rest of the movie, not a peep from the crowd other than an occasional scream in fear. On the way out of the theater, the silence continued. What is usually a jubilant exit was instead a quiet, slow walk with a bunch of pale-faced kids unable to speak.
Interesting. Huh.
Cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
So appreciate the thought on that, Dave.
I don't know if this fits with that, but I did want to mention this. We've once again stumbled into an anniversary with the film. This is the 50th year.
Yep.
And last week was Texas Chainsaw Massacre Day in Austin.
Really?
And they had some of the screenwriter and some of the cast members that are still alive were there. Toby Hooper died like 8 years ago. But they were there tonight at the Bullock Museum at the University of Texas, which is, one of their big museums. They're doing a screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a bunch of those same people doing a Q&A afterwards. And then next weekend, the restaurant's doing a big thing for the 50th year. So it's like we're right in the middle of TCM time. And the Texas reference, I also kind of wanted to bring this up. TCM is known as the film that made the Texas film industry, because there had really been few movies made in Texas, other than the Alamo movies, right?
Sure.
Some Alamo movies, but other than that, few movies made in Texas. It established Texas as, number one, a place where you could make an indie film pretty good, pretty well, which is what got, Robert Rodriguez and Richard Linklater and brought the major got the sort of the framework established to bring movies shooting to Texas. And there have now been more than 1,000 horror movies made in Texas since that film.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it was not only unique for its time, but it ended up being a trendsetter there as well.
In a variety of ways.
Very, very interesting. A lot of these things I did not know. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy this segment, because I do learn things, especially about movies like this that, I've always known about, but didn't really know about.